Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to the very last episode of the 2020 Sree Global Show about COVID-19. We ring out the worst year of many of our lives with a conversation about the year in words, ideas, and concepts. A fun, important way to look at this unbelievable year, unprecedented year among the words we use this year. And we have four fabulous guests, great friends of the show, who are joining us to talk about their memorable words that they remember and won't forget as part of 2020. Carla Baranakis at Kabara is with us. Jonathan Borstein at Jonathan 1003. Paula Kiger at Big Green Pen. And Sunny Slaughter at Sunny_Slaughter. They are all friends of the show and are going to guide us as they tell us about words, concepts, and ideas that we will all be talking about. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for joining me as we talk about this. Please share it with your friends and family. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and on LinkedIn. And we'd love to get your terms in here as well. Tell us where you're watching from and tell us your candidates for word or phrase of the year. Hi, everyone. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. And please tag your friends. They can watch live or they can watch later. If you haven't seen this show before, we've had 259 episodes since March. We did 250 episodes in a row, and then we moved to a once or twice a week format. And in these first few episodes that we've had, in our first 250 episodes, we've had more than 1 million viewers, 457 guests, including 257 women. We keep the ratio up again this time, from 73 cities and 20 countries. You can find our archives, youtube.com/SreeNet. All 259 episodes are there. And you can also find us in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in. We're super grateful to our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. Please find both of them and please follow both of them. And I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. We'd love to work with you in 2021 for your virtual events or hybrid events, we hope, or even physical events to help you plan to make the most of these virtual and hybrid events in 2021. We've done events for 50 people and for 100,000 people, and we bet your events are somewhere in between. You can find my email address right on the screen, and we'd love to talk to you, so please get in touch. All right, are you ready to talk about words, ideas, and trends and topics and concepts that dominated this year? From PPE to PPP to pandemic to defund the police to doom scrolling. So many phrases caught our eyes this year, and we are going to have a chance to talk about all of them with our friends Carla Baranakis, Sunny Slaughter, Jonathan Borstein, and Paula Kiger. So everyone, please welcome our friends as we say hello to everybody right now. Hi, folks.
Hello.
So great to have all of you here. Some of you are returning after just a few days and some of you after a while. We're just very grateful to all of you. We should start by just asking Jonathan, who came up with the idea for this topic, to give us some of his big picture thoughts on understanding the role that words played in our lives this year and thinking about what we should know about them. So Jonathan, over to you.
Basically, one of the current chronic themes in the show from the beginning was language, and the question of non-racist, non-sexist language. And as I pointed out to you privately, this issue is not new. It's been around for more than 40 years. 40 years ago, the first handbook on the subject was published. It's still in print. In many ways, it's the best book on the subject. And people are still acting as if it's something new. And it's been around for a while, and it's something that is part of what we look. Language tells us how to interpret what we see, and what we see requires language to convey it. So it's very, very important in that sense. To me, the two most interesting things that have happened in language over the past year or so is first, the fact that Black is now capitalized when referring to a group of people. This is long overdue, which, by the way, is typical of usage guides to be behind the curve, but it is finally done. And two is a greater sensitivity to questions of gender, not just in pronouns, but in titles, which is, again, something that goes back 40, 50 years. And those are the general things. Language is culture, culture is language. If we want to change culture, we must change the language. And now on to
thank you, Jonathan. I'm just surprised that there's a book about non-sexist writing 40 plus years ago. Who the authors of the book? Yeah. I had no idea. One of the things I learned this year is not enough to be non-racist. You have to be anti-racist. That's another concept that we learned a lot and thought about this year. So thank you, Jonathan. Let's go to Carla, who's going to share one of her phrases. So just so that everybody knows, the idea is that each of our friends is going to share a term, and then we're all going to, they'll share why they think it's important, and then we'll all respond. We'd love for you to play along as well. Please share your words. We'll come to your words too, and please jump in at any point. So Carla's going to get it started, and then Sunny. So go ahead, Carla.
All right, the term I'm going to start with is what has become a little bit of slang is the COVID, or COVID-19, or the novel coronavirus. And it's hard to believe, but a year ago, the term COVID-19 had not yet appeared in the New York Times. Mm-hmm. As far as I can tell, it first appeared on January 8th, and throughout January, toward the end of January, there were stories about it every day in the paper. But throughout January, the stories were, it might come to New York. It's this thing that has been found in China. There was a story about why do bats have so many viruses, because they thought it originated in bats. And if you think about it now, we don't even say COVID-19 so much anymore. People will just say that, COVID or the COVID. And, if you go back almost a year, people didn't even understand why the 19 was part of the name. And the reason for that is because it was first found in 2019. Some people mistakenly believed that it meant that there had been 19 different versions of this virus, which was incorrect. So it's amazing how a word that we had very little knowledge of a year ago has come to affect all of our lives in a variety of ways, some ultimately drastic, horrible ways, and some in ways that are more on the level of inconvenience, but we have all truly been affected.
We really have, and we should point out that Carla everyone here is a writer, everyone here is a communicator, someone who's with deep interest in words, but Carla was former national copy chief of the New York Times, so she pays extra attention to words and their meanings and their usage. So let me ask if anyone else has a reaction to what she brought up. Anybody want to jump in? Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yes, what interested me, particularly in the beginning, was that COVID was in some cases all in caps, or all this first letter cap and the rest small. And some people put the hyphen 19. It was very inconsistent. But eventually it became more in the United States, all in caps, while within capital C's and rest in small letters.
Yeah.
And that's really important. Other thoughts from folks?
Yeah, I was thinking about The fact that this word has impacted the world in such a way that everyone across the world recognizes it. As Jonathan, like I actually write it with all the caps and the -19. But the fact that this one particular word means the same thing to all of us. Sometimes people kind of have different nuances as it relates to words and what they mean. But this particular word, whether it's all capitals and the 19 without the 19, the COVID, coronavirus, capital C, it all means something. It has changed our lives in 2020. The word, the impact of COVID has really, it's probably one of the most powerful words, not just of the year, but maybe of our lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
Very correct. Anyone else? Otherwise, what I want to do is just to show you, I only learned well into doing the show many weeks, maybe even a couple of months after, that actually COVID stood for something. So as the WHO chief explained, CO is for corona, VI is for virus, and D is for disease. And 19 was when the outbreak happened. So I didn't realize COVID was a short form, was an acronym, I guess is the way is the right term for this. And so, those of you who are editors may know the difference between an acronym and an abbreviation. But most people, I don't think, even now realize that COVID is a combination of all of those letters.
And that coronavirus is actually not new.
Right.
The coronavirus is not a new virus. The 19 separates it, but it's not a new type of disease, I should say, a viral disease.
Correct. Thank you for sharing that. I'll also point out one of the other terms that became a political usage this year was President Trump using the word China virus and other pejorative terms as a political weapon to go after China, and there were issues around that. So let's move on. And I know that Sunny has a word for us to look at.
Yes, so I actually have a phrase, and my phrase is, I'm speaking. The phrase I'm speaking came from when you think back to our now very powerful first woman of color, African-American, Black, Asian, Indian descent, when Vice President-elect Kamala Harris, HU, for all of you Bison folks, had to inform the current dude, she said, I'm speaking. Because most often when women particularly are speaking, they are interrupted. Not that men are not interrupted, but women are interrupted in such a way that they are dismissed and overlooked. And when she said those two words, I'm speaking, she took command of the room. And I thought those were powerful words that then became memes and stood out and really empowered women. And she did it with a smile.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, what a powerful image. I remember hearing her saying it. And I want to ask you, Sunny, the fact that she had to say it smiling, because if she had said it, if she'd gotten angry, it would have been used against her. And so you can see she's being extra smiley as she said that. Please react to that.
So Black women in particular, we have been called angry and irate and arrogant whenever we stand up for ourselves. And it happens to all women, but particularly Black women and women of color, they get to be demeaned. And had she not said it smiling, she would have come off as the angry Black woman, which are the other phrase that can be used against us. And I'm speaking was her weapon of choice, with the smile really kind of guiding the fact that I can say this with a smile. Now, she might have been cursing underneath her breath, but it was very important for her to say it with a smile, and the fact that she had to say it more than once to him because he's so disrespectful. This happens a lot with women. But and she's smiling like the real big cheesy smile, like you see I'm still talking, right? I'm speaking. So it was really important for him to shut up. And thank you for pointing that out, that she really did have to smile. We always have to smile through things that we don't want to.
And do you, as someone who has had to live this, but also observing how the media has reacted to all of this, do you think that Black women are held to a higher level of this even than Black men?
Every day, all day, because we literally have to, this is another word we use, check Black men who tend to disrespect us as well. Tone and tenor. Our tone and tenor cannot rise above being classy and dignified, even though we have been harmed. So I think it's really important. When she said it, it allowed all women, regardless of race, to be able to sit in the room and remember you can still get your point across with a smile and just say, I'm speaking, and everyone in the room. That is a phrase that everyone will recognize when another woman says it to someone who interrupts them. I'm speaking. They now have it on shirts.
They do. Thank you, Sunny. Sunny is a racial equity expert and so much more. She's also a recent winner of a Washington area Business Women Leaders Award and so much more. Thank you so much, Sunny. And everyone, please follow Sunny. She's Sunny_Slaughter on Twitter, and Carla is Kabara on Twitter. Let's go to Paula Kiger, who joins us from Tallahassee.
Great, thank you, Sree. My first one is unprecedented. And that's not because there aren't many things about our current situation, our situation since March, that have not been unprecedented. There is a list, a long list. But it's a word that quickly lost its power because we started overusing it. And on our editorial team at a digital journalism shop, in about 2 weeks from March 15th, or when the pandemic started hitting, we began rolling our eyes. And I kind of equate it to the amazing of 2020. Amazing to me is a word that we've started using because our package of Oreos is fresh. It's amazingly fresh. I mean, it's a good thing, but it's not earth changing. And I think unprecedented has lost some of its power since the pandemic started in March. And I consider it a challenge to those of us who use language and love language to do something different and creative and concise other than unprecedented, to really tell our stories accurately and in a way that the people who read what we produce will take what they need away from and be inspired or informed or whatever we're aiming for with that particular piece of writing.
I love that. I would just say that it's an example of show, don't tell, right? So saying it's unprecedented, tell us what makes it unprecedented.
Exactly.
Anyone want to react to that use of that phrase?
When I worked at the New York Times, the unwritten rule was that you didn't use the word unprecedented because for almost everything there is a precedent. So it's not even normally an accurate word. Now in 2020, there have been many unprecedented things that have happened. But again, as Paula pointed out, the word being overused makes it lose its meaning and its power.
All right. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I think that there was a kind of a booster rocket for the overuse of unprecedented because of Trump's mispronunciation as unprecedented.
Yes.
And that kind of gave it a little bit more of a boost in everyone's mind, consciously or subconsciously. I can't tell you.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, folks. If you've just tuned in, we're talking to Jonathan, Paula, Carla, and Sunny about the words that they will remember from this year. And we'd love for all of you to join in as well. We see lots of comments coming in, and we'll go to those in just a minute. But Jonathan has one to share with us.
I think I'm going to pick the use of they as an all-purpose pronoun. It's not new. It goes back 40, 50 years. And actually, as pointed out in this book I keep referring to, the misuse or so-called misuse of they has something like 5 centuries of precedent that you can cite. So it is not unprecedented. And the fact that it came into the fore and became controversial intrigues me. Is it the only solution to not using he or she or he or she? No, it is not, but it is the one that most people seem to be able to manage. And it seems to develop a certain amount of traction. Will that traction stay? I don't know. I will suggest it's something to watch. See what happens.
Wow.
Wow.
I just want to react again. I can't believe they has been around 40, 50 years. That's just stunning.
As a quote mistake, 5 centuries. I would argue that given the fact that it's been a 5-century-old mistake, maybe the grammarian should throw the towel and raise the white flag on the issue in general. It's a losing battle.
Let me ask Carla about that. I know in places like the New York Times, people would, even in conversation perhaps, would kind of tie themselves in knots trying to use he or she. They would say that, right? Because they were trying to cover 2 genders. They would say he or she, things like that. So was the word they welcomed as a opportunity to avoid that kind of awkward usage, or was that fought in a place, of course, that continues to use Mr., Ms., Mrs. I saw Mrs. in a story in the New York Times yesterday, and I was, as prep for today, I was just thinking, so awkward to use Mrs. even today.
Mm-hmm.
The use of they was certainly resisted for quite a while, and we were constantly turning, as you mentioned, turning somersaults to try to rephrase sentences so that we didn't get into that difficulty. But I believe AP Style Book has now embraced the use of they, and
It has.
if I'm not mistaken, I think the Times is also allowing it too. For people of my generation to hear they use that way after being trained for so long and so diligently not to use it that way, it sort of makes me, stop for a moment, and I'm like, oh, it's okay to do it now. And that points out that language is a constantly changing organism. We don't speak the way that Shakespeare wrote, and we don't even speak now the way my parents spoke when they were young. So language is constantly changing, and this is a change that people of my generation will certainly have to get used to.
Okay, thank you. Let's look at some of the comments that have been coming in and just greet our viewers. People are, of course, watching from all over the world. Typically at this point, the first person we greet is Jonathan Borstein from the East Village, because he's watched all 259 episodes, but he has been conscripted to be on the air with us. So let's see who's saying hello first. Sujana Chandrasekhar is happy 259th episode, says Dr. Sujana. She's really important to this topic in part because she taught me PPE in an early episode of this series. In the first 4 or 5 episodes, we interviewed her, and she used the term PPE, and I had never heard it before. And of course, it became a term that we live and breathe it, so to speak. And it's what saved lives, and the lack of it has taken lives. And thank you, Sujana, for sharing that term. Thank you for watching and for your incredible show that you and Marina Kurian host every Sunday called She's on Call. And we have learned so much from that show at 11 a.m. Eastern on social media. So everyone, please follow Sujana on Twitter and Marina and their show. So thank you very much, Sujana, for being with us. Let's see who else is here. Rahadyan is here. Have a good time, everyone. I'll catch a replay tomorrow. Rahadyan has been watching all of these episodes. It's been great. Subbalakshmi is watching from Bangalore. What a lovely topic to discuss. Thank you for joining us. Our friend Steve Taylor is watching from Philly. Hello. And Neil, our other friends watching from Springfield, particularly here for Jonathan, Carla, Sunny, and Paula. Oh, and me also. Thank you. Thank you, Neil. Elsie says, yay, Carla. And our friend Stefan Kaplan, who also has a terrific show on Saturdays. The Spin It Social Hour says, greetings from Ramsey, New Jersey. The flaneur with attitude is sans chapeau tonight. So that's a reference to Jonathan with his great hats. The Oxford English Dictionary has been unable to name its traditional word of the year for 2020, instead exploring how far and how quickly the language is developed this year. So they didn't have a single word, is that right? Or did they have multiple words, or what did they do? Does anyone know?
I don't know.
I think they did multiple words. I'm not sure.
Okay. Diane from New Jersey says, fabulous panel, of course. And Sujana is suggesting some terms, N95,
Yeah.
sourdough bread, virtual meetings, and
Yes,
Zoom.
we have those.
We have some of those terms. I gotta say, I might be the only person who didn't make sourdough this entire. Anybody else here?
I didn't.
No, I didn't.
So we found 5 people who didn't make sourdough, so we may be the only 5 who did not. But great term, Sujana. Thank you. And
Yeah.
Sonali says, glad to be here from LA. Thank you. And Diane says, great panel with Carla, Sunny, Paula, and Jonathan. Thank you, Sree and Neil, for the amazing shows that kept us all sane and connected. That's just a lovely, lovely message. So many thoughts are coming here. And Sujana says, yes, Sunny, I'm speaking. She gives you a thumbs up for that. And so does Neil. This is great. And then Subbalakshmi says from Bangalore says, Sunny, I love the way you explain I'm speaking. So that's just great. Sujana says, unprecedented is indeed overused and turned into unprecedented on November 3rd or November 8th, whenever the Electoral College. I mean, there are also terms that we have obviously been around for hundreds of years, but concepts that now we're paying attention to. Electoral College, right? Like we were really paying attention to that as well. And
Sree,
go ahead.
Oh, I was thinking, and when we say PPE, some people just know the letters, but they don't. They only think of PPE as the mask and what they see in medicine, but law enforcement uses PPE as well. So there are other industries that actually have been using personal protection equipment always. So it's just things that, while things change, they also stay the same. And then people have become more aware of. And even the term they, and I'm sure Paula was going to talk about this, they as the pronoun, when you start thinking about how people identify themselves, specifically when you think about the belonging community, which I am a part of online, and we do a lot of work talking about pronouns and how we now see a lot of them indicated in people's signature. It's one of the things that I teach when I talk about leadership, how people should actually include that so individuals will know how to identify you. I use she and her, but someone else might use they. And that's a proper pronoun for identification of how someone identifies themselves and how they prefer for you to identify them. So it's words matter. And I think this is a great show to talk about how important words really are and how we communicate with one another.
Thank you. Subbalakshmi says, what from WhatsApp I read, JOMO, joy of missing out, feeling content with staying in and disconnecting as a form of self-care and also caring for the world. And the antonym is FOMO, which of course I've heard of and used a lot. That's beautiful. I think that's really well put. So I know a lot of us did stay home, and Jonathan, you always talked about that and the importance of that without using that phrase, but you were using versions of that. Let's go back to Carla for your next term, Carla.
All right, since we've mentioned sourdough and some of the other cooking things, I will toss out the term quarantine cooking. And we've all been referring to this phrase. And if you go on YouTube, you can see even some of the celebrity chefs are doing videos about quarantine cooking. My contention is quarantine cooking is not any different than cooking. It's just we've all gotten so used to takeout food and fast food and drive-throughs and ordering pizza that actually cooking and even these kits that that a lot of people order, but to actually take something and go just with the ingredients and make it from scratch. This is something relatively new. But the quarantine cooking thing, I'm going to give you a little plug for my great niece, Evie. She is not yet 3 years old. And for the last year, she's had her own show on Instagram where she does quarantine cooking. And it was actually a vehicle that got her a few seconds of fame on CBS This Morning a couple weeks ago. So, if you've got the whole age span going from, a not yet 3-year-old doing quarantine cooking on up to Paula Deen.
So let's take a look at Evie and this piece. Let's put that on right now.
With a toss. Take it away, Evie.
Oh my God, thanks, Tony. Christmas cookies. Hi, Lord. What's cooking? And what's what?
That is so good. Evie, thank you very much.
Starting with the thanks, Tony.
Knows the business inside and out.
What's cooking?
She's got a quarantine cooking show on Instagram. That's her set there. And she's a big fan of Vlad and CTM. And so she sent that in.
I like how
she says our names, Tony and Vlad.
I like Vlad. Well,
Thank you so very much, Evie. Can't wait to taste those cookies too.
Tell us how the people can find her, please.
She's on Instagram, and I believe her shows are posted under my niece's name, which is Callie Baleke, Bauleke. And she can also be found on Facebook, again, under her mother's Facebook page, Callie Baleke, Bauleke.
All right.
And she's also her local CBS affiliate TV station is going to be doing a story about her this Friday. So she's getting her 15 minutes of fame before she turns 3 years old.
No, right?
Amazing. All right, Sunny, your turn.
Vaccine hesitancy is what we have been talking about lately and the term. And I find it really interesting because, there's always been a lot of controversy around vaccines. And now with the introduction of COVID into our lives and trying to get well, vaccine hesitancy has really placed a particular lens on Black and Latinx and communities of color, and that there's some type of hesitancy. And actually there's a false narrative around vaccine hesitancy when it comes to, I think, how they're trying to incorporate how public health and medical professionals are talking about incorporating the importance of vaccines. I think we're not all having the same conversation around vaccines, and they really need to figure out, the hesitancy is not new around vaccines, but now we're using this term vaccine hesitancy instead of really talking about what the issues are, more and more around why individuals don't want to get vaccinated. I am going to get the vaccine, just to be clear about that. I am a person in the community talking about the need and importance of it. But I think when you start labeling things about vaccine hesitancy, and then you say, well, Black people don't want to get the vaccine, or minorities don't want to get it, and you put vaccine hesitancy on there, and you forget about all of the reasons why there's distrust in the community. I think then the word becomes more of a labeling, a negative label on communities of color who have reasons to be afraid. And, before we came on, I was talking about health disparities and the mistreatment of Dr. Susan Moore, who died, who was a medical professional. So I just think we always need to be careful when we use terms for individuals who are really not as aware of why the hesitancy, and I'll put emphasis on that word, exist, and then you begin to label other people. So it becomes one label on top of another label that really is negative.
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing up the story of Dr. Moore. It's totally unacceptable what happened. For those of you who missed it, she is an African-American doctor who got COVID herself, and she was going on social media begging for attention and help. She was telling her doctors how bad the situation is, and she was not taken seriously. And we know this is an issue in the Black community, that many doctors don't take Black folks' self-diagnosis or their symptoms as seriously as they could or should. And she died. This poor woman died despite being a doctor, despite knowing the healthcare system. And it's totally tragic, her story. And just thank you for sharing that. And I'm glad that you're saying you will be taking the vaccine. I think it's important for folks like you who are community leaders to share that. There was an interesting exchange yesterday on Jonathan Capehart's show on MSNBC. Dionne Warwick said she's going to wait. She didn't say, I'm never going to take it. She said, I'm going to wait. And a lot of people immediately labeled her an anti-vaxxer. And she said, no, I'm just waiting to see. And we should also put this in context. Historically, there have been many instances of medical treatments and mistreatment of Black people by institutions that makes Black people, some of them, hesitate about participating in this, which is very different from other Americans who, because they've fallen under the spell of either Jennifer McCarthy or Donald Trump or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So this is a bipartisan issue, and don't believe in vaccines because they believe it has side effects and things like that. All of that is going to cost American lives because we will not be able to get the kind of mass vaccinations that we need. And on a side note, today we saw the story that only 2 million vaccines have been actually put into people, even though they expected 20 million by the end of this year. Really a problem in the execution of this. But thank you very much. Anyone else want to comment on that? Go ahead, Carla.
Yes. We also know that the development of the vaccines has happened at a very rapid pace, beyond anything that has ever gone on before with vaccine development. And the speed doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with the vaccines, but I think that the speed with which it all happened does give some people pause. And if you think about other situations not related necessarily to health, for example, when a car company comes to car model, or if they take a car model and they completely revamp it, there are a lot of people that don't want to buy it in that first year because they know that there are going to be problems that need to be worked out. And so if somebody is saying, I'm going to sit back a little bit and see how other people react to this vaccine, I don't think we can criticize them for that.
That's it. Yes, I think that's the point. My sister, very smart. We just had this conversation, Carla, today. My sister is not going to take it right away. And as we were on the phone, who comes up but none other than Dr. Liffey Roy on MSNBC. And I'm having a conversation trying to explain to my sister not to change her mind. And I think the word vaccine hesitancy and Dionne Warwick saying, I'm not going to do it, and people saying, okay, I'm not going to do it right now. I think it just becomes one layer of negative, and all of those things. I think you need to validate where people are and then give them real information. But I pointed out Dr. Liffey Roy. I told my sister, turn on MSNBC right now. I said, Dr. Liffey Roy, someone that I know personally. I said, we were actually just inboxing each other. I want you to begin to watch her on television. So I am taking responsibility, not to change people's minds, but I do think, and I'm going to cut this off so Paula can talk, but I do think as public officials, we have, all of us here on this screen, we have an obligation to try to not do what has been done politically over this and to bully people and to shame them, because I see a lot of shaming and bullying going on over vaccine hesitancy and over whether people will get it. And I think that is why this word matters and why it's important. And I thought it was important for us to talk about this so we can reduce the amount of shame and bullying that I am seeing personally in people's comments when it comes to vaccines and hesitancy together.
Beautifully put, Sunny, thank you. But we do want to clarify, this is different from the kind of BS that someone like Tucker Carlson is spewing on Fox News. So the totally different and important to register. Neil says Sunny Slaughter just cited our friend Dr. Lippy Roy, who was the very first guest on this show, and says, as the issue of vaccine hesitancy came up, Lippy is a frequent guest on MSNBC and NBC News, and she was on the New York Times read-along last two Sundays ago. It was great to have her. And that's a good point at which I want to just remind folks or tell folks that the New York Times read-along, which we do every single Sunday, is back on the air this Sunday after a break. And we have a fabulous show. Bill Rhoden will be with us. William C. Rhoden, a byline many of you who read the New York Times know. He's a former New York Times award-winning sports columnist, writer at large for The Undefeated, and author of $40 Million Slaves about the NBA. He's a fabulous follow on Twitter at WC Rhoden, and just a fun person. You'll all enjoy meeting him. Please join us Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And that's the show that runs every Sunday, put together by Neil Parekh, Paula Kiger, Steve Taylor, Julia Weeks, and Carla Baranakis, who's delivered another superstar guest to us. So everyone, please join us on Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. All right, folks, we have about 20 minutes left and lots of words to cover. So we're going to go now to Paula, who's going to give us another term to look at.
Okay, we'll try to make this a drive-by one to make it quick. My next term was drive-by party. And I think when the children of 2020 look back 10 years from now, they may say, remember when I had that drive-by party when I was 7? And it's done two things. It's brought out so much creativity. I have a young 12-year-old friend who did a safari theme party, and they gave out safari cake pops, and every guest brought items for the local zoo so they can help feed the animals, because my 12-year-old friend has a big affinity for animals. So that was really cool. It has brought out so much creativity, but it also has really been a symbol of the discipline we've all had to show. When my goddaughter had a drive-by party for her high school graduation in May, we behaved ourselves, drove by, but then we started a conversation. Before I knew it, we had hugged each other, which was completely opposite the point of doing a drive-by to stay safe. And no one's to blame there, it's just human nature. But I think the drive-by events have been a real example of the dichotomy these times have brought into our lives.
Yeah.
Great word. Thank you for sharing that. I got to tell you, as someone who lives in a city in New York, I've never been part of a drive-by party, but of course, They're the staples of the suburban lives that people lead. And you also had another great term. Let's throw that in here. Graduation.
Micro wedding and mini monies. So many people had, as a parent who's helping plan a May 2021 wedding, when we can't figure out if the guest list will be able to be the 250 or it'll have to be 50 because of where the pandemic is at that point. This is heavily on my mind, but I have a relative who was going to do, I guess, a micro ceremony at her sister's backyard, kind of a smaller thing. But then it was July and COVID was looking bad in that area. They got married at the UPS store by a notary. That is about as mini moni as you can get. And they're just as married and they have a great story, but it's not what they had planned. So micro weddings, mini monies, that whole kind of category of changing your plans in a drastic way.
Wow. Thank you. And a salute to everyone who did have a micro wedding instead of a super spreader event, which is another term that, of course, we've learned. You saw the tragic story in Maine of a single wedding where last I saw something like 15 people got sick. Many more people got sick, and at least a dozen people died from a single wedding. Just unbelievable and very, tragic, but also selfish at the same time. And Paula, we wish your family the very best. I know you will make the right call, all of you together. All right, let's go to Jonathan for another term.
Actually, I'm going to steal Jen Meyer's comment and amplify it. Jan's suggestion was second gentleman, and I would like to add to that the whole question about about Dr. Biden that became a bit of a cause célèbre. And I don't think I have seen as much controversy over titles since it was first introduced, again, 40 years ago. The term, the second gentleman, is a little on the cute side, but it's based on very antiquated notions as to a political figure and who is the spouse, to use a gender-neutral term. And the question about Dr. Biden, again, belongs to that same school of thought, where that the woman doesn't have a title, the man does. And it's not the case. She's always had that title and used it, and by the way, earned it, since she does have a doctorate. And this to me is interesting. I don't know where it's going to go. I think Dr. Biden will continue to be called Dr. Biden because she's always been called Dr. Biden. I think second gentleman is always going to be a little cute. I think it's going to make people wonder, is, first lady, first gentleman, second gentleman, that sort of thing. Are they in fact titles, or do we need to approach it differently?
Two great words and concepts to discuss: the Jill Biden story and what happened with her use of her doctorate and whether it's appropriate. So many medical doctors stepped up and said that's perfectly fine. And no one complained when Henry Kissinger was being called doctor everywhere. And so this was, again, a political thing where conservative journalists and writers went after Jill Biden because it was a chance to go after her. And they even, were proofreading her dissertation. And somebody joked, so are conservatives all going to read everyone's dissertations and correct them for free? That would be great. And about the second gentleman, it's such an interesting concept to think about what happens. FLOTUS is the Twitter handle, right? At FLOTUS. What will the new one be? And how can there be a second gentleman if there's no first gentleman? And what would happen in a future same-sex couple that becomes president and spouse? Like, what would happen?
We sort of like, that's why the thing is, it's kind of cute now, but it's an issue that needs to be addressed in the language at some point. Maybe we need to sort of recognize that the spouse of an elected politician is not an appendage of that politician, but rather an independent being with a life, career, whatever of his or her own. In the case of Dr. Biden, a relatively distinguished one. Not that Paris's husband is not distinguished. But it sort of makes you question these things. This is sort of a historic thing because I'm probably the oldest person on this panel. But going back to my parents' generation of doctors, which included, by the way, female physicians, a woman who was a doctor was addressed when she was in practice as Dr. whatever her surname was. Usually it was what we then would call her maiden name, now I guess her birth name. And then, but socially, she was always Mrs. whatever her husband was. And that was a clue as to whether you were dealing with her socially or professionally. It sounds maddening to deal with, as I could tell from Sree's hand motion there. If you're brought up with it, it's actually relatively easy, but if you're coming at it cold, is it weird? And it should be weird, actually.
Sure, absolutely. Let's see some of the other comments coming in here. Mark is suggesting curbside pickup as a term. And everyone check out Mark Oppenheim on Twitter. He's at MEO Jobs, and he has a terrific session tomorrow where they're doing a industry mixer, so do check him out. But curbside pickup is, again, a non-city term, right? It's mostly for the suburbanites and rural folks on here, people with cars, but it's a term of the year for sure. And let's see, Neil says, my wife is Dr. Pamela Jean Stumpo, and I'm proud of her. She got a PhD from the University of Washington in 2012. And Neil says, the spouse of an elected official is not an appendage of the elected official. Yes, very much, yes. And Kathy says, Washington State Governor Chris Gregory dubbed her husband First Mike. That's cute. All right. Folks, we have time, I think, for maybe one more each. So let's, if you want to do one or two together, we could do that as well. If you have things that you can chain together. Thank you. Go ahead, Carla, you're on.
Well, I have one that's kind of a big one, but it covers a lot of areas, and that is the term "I can't breathe." The George Floyd killing in Minneapolis, which I grew up in a suburb of Minneapolis, so I felt, truly shaken to the core by this, as many people across the country were shaken to the core by this. But to hear him saying, I can't breathe, and then, know that the life was just snuffed out of him was outrageous and horrible, and really opened up people's eyes about the kinds of things that people in the Black community and in other minority communities have faced for centuries. And then to see, some of the things that have happened to people at the hands of often white police officers, Black people being shot as they're holding up their cell phone or as they're sitting in their car or, as they're sleeping in their own apartment. These things have really brought a sense of the importance of dealing with our business as a society and politically, and in a way that we can all be able to understand some of the ridiculous challenges, and challenges isn't even a good enough word for this, but the ridiculous things that people are facing out there. But then you extend the term "I can't breathe" out, and it also is one of the main symptoms of COVID-19 is that people can't breathe. And then, you look at, some of the, because people have been stressed out because they've had to stay home because of COVID-19. And so now there are these apps that try to help you calm down. And what do they tell you to do? They tell you to breathe. And so I think that phrase covers a lot of things, but I think that it goes right to the heart of the race problems we have in this country that we can no longer look away from. And so I think for me that is the term of the year.
Thank you. Beautifully put, and thank you for sharing that. Carla, everyone, please tag your friends right now. They can watch this right after we're done with the show. We'll be re-airing this on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. It'd be wonderful for you to share this. Your friends can watch. We've covered so many different topics. I'm glad our next speaker is Sree Slaughter, because Sree was live streaming as soon as the news of George Floyd came out. And I remember watching Sree, who was in tears as she watched, and really brought home to many of us who hadn't been paying attention yet the severity of the problem, the crisis at hand, and telegraphed how so many of us would feel the summer and well beyond. At the end of the show, we will read some of the names because one of the things we've wanted to do and we've been told to do is to say their names, and we will do that at the end. But Sree, over to you.
I am going to follow up Carla's very profound words with Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. And the whole concept behind what Paula was talking about, and I can't breathe, and in the movement of Black Lives Matter, and when people then who are not racially aware of what that means when they say all lives matter, it's really a powerful thing when you think about why we say Black Lives Matter. Why those particular words, those three words together mean so much, because for Black people, all lives don't matter when we can be murdered for any reason, and I think Paula might get into this after, but for any reason.
We've lost Sree, but she'll be joining us. So meanwhile, we'll come back to Sree. Let's go to Paula.
Well, and I can't take off where Sree did and do her justice, because Sree, I so clearly remember that first read along we did after George Floyd's death. And I think Neil was hosting, or Sree, whichever one, said the death of George Floyd, and Sree said no, the murder of George Floyd. And Sree has been a teacher to us in so many ways over the past few months, and I think we're all grateful. But maybe what she was referring to was the fact that I had all of the quote before verbs while Black, bird watching while Black, walking while Black, sleeping in your own bed while Black. I mean, that all of it's a travesty, and it got told in so many stories over the past few months. And I think one thing that this period of time has pointed up, especially since George Floyd's murder, is the privilege those of us who are white and are not Black have had, is that white was our default. That we see the whole world as everybody else is something else, that we see our lives as a default, and that's a privilege we've all had to come to terms with in many ways, and in a long overdue situation.
No, thank you for saying that. We've heard the blank while Black for years. Some of you might remember the Christie Todd Whitman, governor of New Jersey, patting down a motorist on the New Jersey Turnpike and smiling because she was trying to show how tough she was. But this year, many of these terms have been around for a long time, but this year people really focused on it. And just this weekend, we saw the story of a white woman calling out a young Black boy and saying he had stolen her phone, what was he doing? He was standing while black. He was just standing nearby while black. Thank God his father was there. Today he gave an interview saying, I don't know what would have happened if my father hadn't been there. And that just tells you the kind of tragic situation we're in. One of the things I learned from Sonny and others and doing all these episodes this year is the term the talk for black people, that especially to their boys, black parents have to give something that they call the talk. In our family, the talk is about relationships and drugs and things like that. In black communities, it is often about staying alive and what you do if your car gets pulled over and keep your hands in the steering wheel, like things that I would never have to think about saying. And it was brought home to me, especially some of you may remember a video of a young black boy playing basketball in his own in his own driveway, and a police car comes by and he hides behind his own father's or mother's car because he saw a cruiser go by. He was doing nothing wrong. He was in his own driveway playing basketball. And that's where it starts, where, it was a tragic example of that young boy worried that this police cruiser would not be treating him the same way a white child would be treated. So thank you, Paula. Sonny, we got cut off. So if you want to pick that up, we'd love to hear you again.
I would just like to say, this working with all of you and being with all of you all of these years has been really profound for me. And I hope when people look at this segment and these last words as we talk, as Carla spoke and Jonathan and you, Sree and Paula, that they understand when this show has really been phenomenal about addressing the issue of race, very head on and steadfast. And when I talk about Black Lives Matter and I say it with you all and the diversity of the screen, I speak my truth. I'm speaking. You all are not interrupting. You all are supporting. This is what America should be. When I say Black Lives Matter here, I'm not saying it trying to convince all of you and our audience that Black lives do matter, that Black lives and all lives are not the same thing. I'm not trying to get you to understand the pain of what it's like for me in this skin, for people that look like me in this skin that we can't shake off. When Paula talked about privilege, that you all recognize the privilege that exists. And this show and all of the shows that you all have put together, and Jonathan has never missed one, because it's important. This is when all lives matter, when we as humans can come together and recognize who we are, where we are, and the truth of what happens to those that are different. That's when all lives matter. But we can't say all lives matter until we really recognize and understand why Black lives matter and why those words are profound and important for us all to say and not dismiss. I am grateful for all of you for as individuals and as a collective for your love, because you understand that Black lives do matter. And I'll say this, yesterday, my son got into a car accident and he's in Cleveland, Ohio. And I was on the phone with him and he said the state trooper was coming back around. And I am a federally certified law enforcement instructor with the Department of Homeland Security. My son's father is a police officer and has been for many, many years. But when the police officer was coming back around, my son says to me, and my children grew up in law enforcement. We have a whole family of law enforcement of multiple races, to be exact. My son says, Mom, the state trooper is coming. I'm going to call my dad. You know why? because it was important for him to have his father on the phone who wears the uniform in case he needed to talk to the police officer who was wearing the uniform. I didn't ask my son, is the officer white? Because my son's father is black, but he didn't say, well, let me call Uncle Mike, who is white. He just said, let me call my dad. I need to call my dad. That's why Black Lives Matter. That's why.
Thank you, and I'm glad he's okay after the accident. And this was after an accident. This was not a traffic stop. And
Right.
still, there, the worry that things can go wrong at any moment, at any time, is clearly part of what so many millions of people in this country have to worry about every day that others don't have to. Thank you, Sunny. Let's go to Paula for. Yeah, I guess, Paula, you gave us a term. Anything else you wanted to add, Paula?
I wanted to add one more thing back on the topic of pronouns. I think one thing that we've seen a lot more in 2020 is people adding them, for example, to their Twitter profiles. Mm-hmm. And I've seen lots of conversations about, why should I do it? Everybody knows I'm she, her. They've known me for 40 years. They know I go by she. But it's so someone who wants to use they/them doesn't have to ask. It's so it becomes a habit that we all know from the get-go. We don't have to make assumptions. So if you're struggling with whether to do that or not, there's lots of writing about it and why it's a good idea just to universally do it. You're not doing it for you. You're doing it for your fellow human being. And you'll see journalism articles where there's a correction. This has been corrected to amend the pronouns of the person I interviewed from she to they. It is an adjustment. Carlos, same here for my generation too. But language does change, and it's about respect. And if we need anything after this year, it's mutual respect. So I just wanted to get that in about the pronouns.
Thank you. And here's Neil. Last year in October, he posted about the importance of using pronouns and declaring your own, and why cis people should declare them. I can just say, just my own, it just shows my age that I'm not used to them at all. I didn't grow up like the rest of the people on this phone call. I mean, on the show, I think we all came to it in a different place. And when I was teaching at Columbia, I left teaching full time in 2013. This was not something that were put, where students announced it or anything like that. Also, it was grad school, so it was a little different. And then when I went back to teaching last year at Stony Brook, it became something front and center to me, and something that I had to learn and adjust. It doesn't, decades of usage of language doesn't change easily or automatically. You have to work at it. And that's one of the things I learned. So thank you, Paula, and thank you, Neil, for posting that and telling us about the importance of it. Let's go to Jonathan for his final word for today.
I'm going to cover two things. First is that, as has been pointed out by a number of people, most notably Carla, the English language is a living language. It's an organism. And some of the changes are large, which is what we've been discussing, and some of the changes are small. You almost don't notice them. And two almost unnoticeable changes that, I'm sorry for the clumsy English here, I have noticed, are blonde and widow. Blonde, for a woman, is starting to lose its E, so that the masculine form is becoming the universal form. The exact opposite is starting to happen with widow. The male form was widower, but more and more we're seeing widow being used for men. Now, it's still a small change. I don't know if it is going to become sweeping, but I'm seeing the beginnings of it. Probably not in the New York Times, which is very correct, but in other places. And the other thing is, I'm Jonathan 10003. There's a third zero there with my zip code, and the zip code is the East Village, for which I greet you every week.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Jonathan, thank you. And I learned from you that blonde with an E is for women. I did not know that.
I didn't know that either.
So there you go.
It's one of the few adjectives that's changed gender in English.
So do I need to add the E? Is that what you're saying when I say I'm a blog? What?
It depends upon what you want to do, because as I said, we're starting to lose the E.
You're trying to lose the E and make everybody without the E. See, look at that.
I'm seeing the beginnings of it. I don't know whether it's going to last. Again, we only have centuries of precedent, but I'm seeing it. And I think
Just email me what I need to do.
Going back to Paula's point, if you're she, her, then you have an E at the end, because to be consistent. But
Okay.
if you want to be cutting edge, you drop the E.
Well, I'm always cutting edge. I want to cut around the edge.
When I had hair, I was a brunette.
I'll also just point out that to me, again, something that I'm not used to is actress and actor. When I was growing up, I could never have imagined that women would prefer actor at one point down the road, and that's what they've done. And now it's universal and it's accepted. Still in the back of my head, sometimes I have a little problem adjusting, but that's what we're talking about, that it wouldn't have seemed normal. So what Jonathan's saying is that widow could be used or might be used going forward for both men and women.
Yeah,
that I think would
usually it's the male form that becomes the gender neutral form. This is the only I can think of where the female form seems to be achieving dominance. I do not know where this gets us. I'm not going to pretend to be a deep intellectual here, but it's just something I've observed.
Well, thank you. That's amazing. Let's look at. We'll come to each of you for a final comment and anything you'd like to add. There are just so many other comments here. Let's see. Mark is watching and says, Sree and the crew are not afraid to listen to the truth. Daryl says, as an immigrant, the one thing that has shocked me about America is that it's not free at all, except for white people. They're the only ones who feel free in this country. So I think it's touching on something interesting about who feels free, who feel like they can, that they can do what they like. Neil says, I re-added my pronouns just before Sree brought my Twitter account. Not sure when, why they dropped off. And a good point to bring up, Sunny, vaccine hesitancy compared to anti-vaxxers, which is a different segment of the population. And why hasn't focus fronting changed? Men and women, Mr., Mrs., husband, wife. We talked a little bit about this where I said I noticed the New York Times still uses Mrs., and I can't imagine that they get it right every time, and then they have to go back and correct it when someone calls them out on it. I'm sure that happens on a regular basis. Here's some terms we missed. Apex from back in April. Do you remember that, where we said Apex and then another Apex? There were going to be multiple ways in which we were going to hit the peaks, right? Multiple peaks. We also had the second wave, and we remember the coronavirus committee, a task force, Mike Pence wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, the same Wall Street Journal that decided Dr. Biden is a problematic term. He said there will be no second wave, and of course he was completely wrong. Physical distancing versus social distancing. Tim says, always been physical distancing to me. Now more than ever, we need social connections, even if through Zoom or StreamYard for now. Our friend Steve Taylor was the first to insist we use social distance. Instead of saying social distancing, let's say physical distancing. That's the first time I ever heard that term, which is what Tim is also saying. So a shout out to Steve for very early coming up with that. Mark is talking about hybrid learning, and just lots of other comments. We missed many comments here, but thank you everyone who contributed. Let's go around the table and ask everyone for a final thought, and then we will say their names, and I would be honored to have each of you join us as we say their names. But let's start with, we'll just go around the table here. Jonathan, you want to start us off on a final thought for today?
I think I'm going to do two thoughts. One is, I emphasize yet again, language is a living organism. It can go in this direction or it can go in that direction, but it defines or shapes how we talk about things. And sometimes we have to take control and decide where the direction of the language is. And I seem to be the pitch man for this, or pitch person. Yes, the earliest on it, please look at it. I'm sure it's in the library. If you don't want to
Thank you. Did you give us an author for that book?
Yes,
Or authors?
Casey Miller and Kate Swift, and it's fantastic and well worth it. But it will be in a library if you don't want to. If you want to boycott Amazon.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Let's go to Carla.
I would like to suggest that in 2021, that we make kindness our word of the year. And when I say kindness, I don't mean just kind of a general let's be nice to each other thing, but I mean that we actively go out and look for ways that we can be kind to each other, support each other, and in general help everybody get through what we've learned can be a very difficult life.
Well, beautifully put, Carla. Thank you so much. I want to just use this opportunity to remind everyone that this Sunday, Carla has booked William C. Roden to join us on the New York Times Read Along, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Amazing writer on sports, race, and so much more. Please join us 8:30 a.m. Eastern on all these social media channels. And thank you, Carla. Please follow Carla at Kabara. And let's go to Paula.
Great. This has been a great discussion. I've so appreciated everybody's perspectives. One thing I was thinking about, and I had shared with you, Sree, beforehand, is that saying the names is something that makes these people human to us when it's easy to just put everything into, it keeps happening and we kind of put it all in a mental compartment. But I heard Lucy McBath speak in 2015. Her son was Jordan Davis. And that was one of the first times that hearing her as a mother talk about losing her son and talk about him as a little boy, it was a terrible situation anyway, but that made it so much more real to me. Being able to write about a trans person for Trans Day of Remembrance, her name was Layla, made her human to me. And that's why say their names and say her name was one of the things on my list. And I'm really glad we're adding that to tonight's show, because we do need to recognize that each one of these people was so important and should inspire us to change.
Thank you, and beautifully put. Everyone, please follow Big Green Pen on Twitter. Do you have one of your pens handy? Always, right?
Of course.
There she is. Always an editor. All right, let's go to Sunny Slaughter.
So thank you so much for this amazing time. I wanted to, I do a training called Communication Across Culture and Community. And I started doing this in 2020. So like as a leadership training to talk about how we communicate with individuals and the importance of open communication and how we should be responsible, respectful, and really recognize the dignity that we can add to other people's lives when you ask questions and be respectful. I think the kindness that Carla talked about is really important, and language matters. So the work that I'm doing is really around language and allowing people to be who they are. I think we need more of that and less judgment. So I thank all of you for the work that you do, for the platform that you have, and for just each of you who you are. Just amazing. You know, I don't share you all with everyone because I don't want to have to fight anybody. I am from New Jersey. I still got a lot of little spunk in me. But because each of you means so much to me. And those are the words that I want to share, that I love you all.
Oh, beautifully put. Thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And everyone, please follow Sunny _Slaughter. We always ask about your t-shirts because your T-shirts have a meaning every time, and they're important. So we'll give you a chance to talk about that, Sunny.
So, Black women always have a problem, and women in general, with knowing not only their worth, but actually getting their worth when it comes to business and work and opportunities. So when I found this shirt, sometimes I wear this because I want people to know that I know my worth, and I'm going to add tax, because there was a time when, even though I knew my worth, I didn't speak up for myself like I should, because I didn't think that I would be heard and I would be ignored for my expertise, because I didn't want to be the angry Black woman all the time. So know your worth, then add tax. And trust me, in 2021, I am adding so much tax. I'm going to be overtaxing everything. But I love words. I have shirts, and they have so many words. I have more shirts with words than anything, because words say something. So this says something.
And this is like a shirt made for Zoom, because the words are easily visible. Sometimes I've asked you to stand up or pull that up like that. Instead, it's all visible right at the top. So that might be a new kind of Zoom trend, to have the words at the very top instead of filling up the shirt.
And very clear as to what I'm saying. Money, tax, dollars. I love you guys.
Beautiful comments from Mark and from Diane. So really, really grateful to all of you. And before we go, we're just going to say their names. I want to remind folks of how we started doing this. We interviewed Kimberly Crenshaw, the great Columbia Law School professor who coined the term intersectionality.
Yes.
And I asked her, what can we do as allies of Black community? What can we do? And she said, say their names. I also want to quote another great person who gave me something to, when I asked her the same question, she said, Sree, instead of people asking their Black friends, what can we do to help? Ask yourselves, what have you been doing all these years? And don't expect Black people to have all the answers or to be coaching and teaching all of you. I never forgot that. That was Sunny Slaughter who said all that to me. So I'm grateful.
I have a Say Your Name shirt from Kimberly Crenshaw.
Wow.
When we were together, I have her shirt. So thank you
awesome.
so much.
That's awesome. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Some of you remember this summer, the great African-American artist Titus Kaffir painted this Time magazine cover story, and they put the names of many of the victims of police brutality and police violence on the edge of Time magazine on the cover. This is from June 15th. And this is a photograph I will never forget as long as I live. This is a young Larcinia Floyd with a even younger George Floyd. And she would die 2 years almost to the day that he would be murdered. And they're both buried together in Houston next to each other, side by side. And there's just a very evocative image, and of course the names there as well, but these two photographs side by side. I salute the people at Time Magazine who put this together and brought this to us. So now I'm going to ask our friends here to join me in saying their names. I'm going to ask each of them. I'll call on them to say 2 or 3 names, and then we'll go to the next person and the next person. So we'll start with Sunny, and read a few names, please, and then we'll go from Sunny to Carla, Paula, and Jonathan. Sunny, Carla, Paula, and Jonathan. Go ahead, Sunny, please start.
Trayvon Martin, Yvette Smith, Eric Gardner, Michael Brown, Laquan McDonald, Tanisha Anderson, and Akai Gurley.
Tamir Rice, Jeremy Reed, Natasha McKenna, Eric Harris, and Walter Scott.
Freddie Gray, William Chapman, Sandra Bland, Darius Stewart, and Samuel DeBose.
Janet Wilson, Kaylin Rockmore, Alton Sterling, Philandro Castile, Joseph Mann, Terence Crutcher,
Chad Robertson, Jordan Edwards, Aaron Bailey, Stefan Clark, Danny Ray Thomas, Antoine Rose, and Botham Jean. Sunny, take us home.
Atiana Jefferson, Michael Dean, Ahmad Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd.
Thank you, Sunny, for saying those names, and to Carla, Paula, and Jonathan. I do want to say that these names, some of them you have never heard before. Some of these are household names, and it's tragic that any names are household names, and it's tragic that the other names are not. It is, and this is not a complete list by any means. Our friend Rehadjan put together a much longer list. This is not even the list of names after George Floyd was killed. There have been several names since then, but he went back to the 1930s and put together a dramatic list that we read for several weeks on the air. Sunny, I feel your pain as you react to reading these names. It's important that we read them, and it's important that we say their names. If you'd like to comment, I would welcome that.
It is hard to know the stories of so many people, to read the names, but then to know the story. You know, Eric Garner was the first person to say, I couldn't read over cigarettes. And Trayvon just walking after getting Skittles. And there it's just a profound feeling. And when you know that it could be someone that you know, someone that you do know. And I have met the mothers of so many of these individuals at the Congressional Black Caucus. I spent time with Eric Garner's mother and so many of them, and it is no one wants to bury their child. And yesterday I sat in my bed last night, and after thinking about my son, which would have been a car accident, but I prayed. I said, God, please take me first. I could not bury my children and still live. These women, their families, these victims of violence, no one should ever have to know this pain. But Sree, I thank you, and Carla and Paula and Jonathan, for the opportunity to be with you all, my family, and the importance that you have placed, Sree, on saying their names and talking about Black lives and talking about the murders and talking about the stories and talking about the tragedies and why we matter. Why this is important and why we must change humanity. Thank you all for everything that you do every day to make a difference for so many.
Sunny, thank you for everything you do and for sharing and for teaching us every time you come on the air and on all your tweets and all the stories you share. I want to tell folks that when you were on the read along that Paula mentioned, you were on with Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel laureate, and we watched as he listened and learned from you. You told your stories, and he quoted you multiple times, and that was very special to see someone like him who doesn't get exposed to a lot of things necessarily. You know, he's always in talking mode rather than listening mode, and he was listening. And anyone who goes back and sees that would understand that. Subbalakshmi says, evocative, powerful, and deeply profound. Thank you for today's show. Deborah says, powerful way to end, say their names.
Oh, Deborah.
So moving. Tell us about Deborah.
Deborah is a very dear and amazing friend and CEO of Elevate in Birmingham, Alabama. She has been a mover and shaker in business world, she does work in diversity and inclusion and equity, and she is absolutely someone that you should have on your show. She is phenomenal, and we go back many, many years in Birmingham, Alabama, but she has lived and traveled across the world doing great work.
Thank you very much for your invitation. Deborah, we'd love to have you on the show in 2021. Rose, Vandana, and I will continue to do a couple of shows a week, and we want to cover various aspects of the crises, right? Race, health, inequality, economy, all of that need to be covered. Laura Silverman, our friend, says we should say all their names. They count, they matter, incredibly important. Mark says it's a powerful statement, Sunny. I'm glad to call you all my friends. And Trilok says my prayers for healing. Yes. And we also heard about emergency use authorization accompanied by liability waiver from vaccine producers. Herd immunity, a term we had never heard before. Most of us had never heard before. We didn't talk about that. Ashok, who's now in Dubai, says 2020 has been a mixed year for all of us, including me. He lost his wife early in the year. His daughter got COVID. He himself got COVID, but he's been joining us and has really shown remarkable strength. Deborah says, love you, Sunny. And Rose is also booking Deborah. And Deborah says, thanks for the invitation. So Sunny will give you that final word and say thank you to Jonathan for coming up with the idea for what turned out to be an informative, powerful, moving, and at times funny show. It's important to laugh. We've been saying that. We've had multiple humor episodes because we said we need to laugh, otherwise we'd cry all day. And Neil has put in a link to the Joe Stiglitz listening to Sunny Slaughter episode of the New York Times read along. Wow. Everyone, please join us to do the New York Times read along with Carla and Paula and Steve and Nia, Julia on Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Our guest is the great William C. Rhoden, Bill Rhoden. Many of you know him from Sports Reporters on ESPN and New York Times columnist. And we will learn a lot together Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. With that, I want to thank all of you. I want to thank Rose and Vandana for an incredible year of shows, 259 episodes. And I will never forget this experience working with all of you. And for Jonathan, who watched 259 episodes in a row, the most dedicated audience member of any show in history on any kind.
We're going to take Jonathan out to dinner. Remember, we're all supposed to get together in New York. So when we are taking Jonathan out to celebrate, we love you, Jonathan. Love you, Neil and Rose. So you pick the place. I'll bring the wine.
Ooh,
you bring the book. I knew that would get everybody.
Ashok says, thanks for the wonderful thoughts and words. And Neil's also complimenting Rose and Vandana. And Laura says, thank you, or now namaste. And that's a gesture that people started doing because of the pandemic. More than 90 minutes tonight, folks. Thank you so much, everybody. Good night, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.